Welcome, welcome. I just want to say I so appreciate everybody joining us today, and we're going to have a great conversation. This is Loren Fogelman with Business Success Solution, and today's topic is Supercharge Your Accounting Firm's Marketing with Podcast. I'm going to be talking and taking a deep dive into that with Justin Grant, but you are in the right place if you're ready to know the steps for launching a podcast. What are the ABCs for that? Podcast pitfalls you want to actually avoid, and what is required to actually make it happen and get it out there. I definitely suggest you have pen and paper ready because Justin is going to share a lot. And then we're going to let you know how you can find out more, connect with him as we wrap things up. A little bit about Justin. He's the founder of Professional Productions, which provides bespoke, high ROI podcasting services for busy professionals, especially accounting firm owners. Justin is a podcast producer. He's a professional audiobook narrator, voiceover artist, so he sounds really good on the microphone. He does sound editing, technical writing, and he's been in the field doing this for over 25 years. And one of the things about Justin is he's overseen the launch and production of more than a dozen podcasts. He's been in this for a long time, seeing so many changes happen in the industry along the way. So he's actually US, but now in the UK, and he's been working for UK podcasting company from 2021 to 2022 before he went ahead and launched Professional Productions. So I just want to say, if you want to find out more about Professional Productions, you want to go to professionalproductions.net. And Justin, please, so welcome you to here. Interested in jumping in and talking about what you have to share.
Loren, it's so nice to be here with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And right off the bat, I just want to know how you got into podcasting and really audio work in general.
Sure. It's a kind of a long story if we go all the way to the beginning. When I was still in high school, I was very interested in doing voice work, and I started off by doing stadium announcing at my high school for the football and the basketball games. So I got my voice chops warmed up from a pretty early age and continued to do that throughout college and into my 20s. Did voiceover work as well. And it wasn't, though, until my 30s that I kind of went digital with it, went more online with it, and started a hobby, really, of narrating audiobooks, which you did mention. And I found I really enjoyed that. I didn't have a lot of time for it because I had other things going on. But then when COVID hit, I suddenly did have a lot of time for it. And so I took that hobby and I kind of turned it into more of a job, which then eventually led me down the path to podcasting. I took work with the company you mentioned, doing the production of podcasts. And so I started in that specific part of audio in 2020. And yes, have had the privilege and pleasure of launching about a dozen podcasts and producing them as well. So that's a pretty quick summary, I suppose, of a fairly long story time-wise.
Excellent. And I know that podcasting has gone through many iterations. It's something that more and more people are going to for information. And there's a reason why a lot of accounting firm owners are now thinking about having a podcast. Mm-hmm. If it's been something on their mind, I want to know what would be the reason that they would want to do? So what should a podcast accomplish? Or are there maybe several different things that it could accomplish?
Yeah. So really, ideally, especially with something like an accounting firm, they're looking to boost their marketing. It's not, the goal ought not to be that your podcast will be what makes you money directly. What you want to boost is your ability to network, your name or brand recognition, your company profile or your personal profile for that matter, and positioning you and your firm as an expert in the space, especially the more drilled down and niched you can get, the better as far as that goes. And the understanding is the podcast is a focus and a centerpiece of just a broader overall marketing strategy. It's about more than just great content, because it's also about getting the word out. You have to be able to do that as well as willing to be patient, because it's going to take a little bit of time to grow your listenership. But while that's happening, you are meeting other people and other firms in the accounting space, and your network is expanding. And so that's one of kind of the unintended fringe benefits of the whole enterprise.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's really important to highlight that, because part of, on the outside, to someone listening to a podcast, but they don't know the inner workings behind it, is that they're getting great content. They can go there for information. They get a sense of who you are without actually meeting someone in person.
Yeah.
But part of what I'm hearing with you, and I found this to be true also, is the networking part, especially for accounting firm owners who might not be going out to network meetings or in a lot of groups. So I'd love to hear from you what your experience has been when it comes to hosting a podcast and how networking kind of fits into that.
Sure. So I think the best example from the shows that I've produced is from Randy Crabtree, who is the host of the Unique CPA. And the Unique CPA is presented by Tri-Merit Specialty Tax, which is based in outside Chicago. Randy has told me, and he has even said so, as I had the opportunity to host a couple of the episodes of his show, the 100th anniversary episode, that his network and the opportunities he's had to meet so many people, travel and do all kinds of appearances, talking about the passionate things for him, like mental health, and certainly like specialty tax. He was a big ERC advocate and anti-ERC fraud person when that was really picking up. He said that if it weren't for the podcast, none of this would ever happen. And he has said repeatedly that he is having the time of his life now that he has done this and kept with it. I mean, obviously it's taken several years to get over the 100 episode threshold, and he has stuck with it, and the rewards have been indescribable for him.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with what you were saying about Randy. We actually met a couple weeks ago at the County Today's Firm Growth Forum, and had a chance to talk. What I have seen is that because of Randy's podcast, people knew him that were at the conference because they've listened to him, and that it was able to really create opportunities for him that he wouldn't have had otherwise, because the people that he was able to bring on as a guest, and you just get to talking from there, and you find some things where there might be synergy and new opportunities happen. Yes,
that's it. And I was thrilled that you got the chance to meet each other, and it really sounded like a fun conference out there in San Diego.
It was, and I've been on his show, and he is a great interviewer, nice guy all around. But getting into this, if someone's been thinking about podcasting, but they really don't know much about it, they haven't really had that much experience either, but it looks like it could be a great idea for getting their firm's name out there and with their branding. So what would be some of the steps to take to start to kick it off and launch it?
Oh, well, there are a lot of them. So just to maybe rattle off a few things.
Yeah, we don't want to overwhelm anybody.
Right. The first step, of course, is you have an idea, and you have to take that idea that will hopefully set your podcast apart, because it has become, a pretty crowded space. So you want to have an appeal that maybe more generic shows don't have. But then you have to take that idea and you have to refine it a little bit and turn it into an actual show concept. You have to consider episode topics, think about the format that you want the show to take. If you'll have guests, you don't necessarily have to. How many episodes you plan to produce, whether it'll be a limited run or it will be ongoing. Then there's even the question, especially for much larger firms, is this going to be an internal podcast? Is this something that you want your culture as a firm to be the consumers of? Then you have to start looking at podcasting platforms, pick one that fits your needs. find music, a voiceover that fits you, produce a logo and artwork, secure how your website's going to be set up. And I haven't even gotten to actually recording the episodes yet. So yes, many, many, many steps.
Okay, so there's some planning, just like with any marketing campaign that needs to be effective. You want to really be able to think about who your audience is, what it is that you're going to be focusing on, and have some overall strategy as to what will make it appealing to where it's going to grab somebody's attention.
Yeah, that's right. And it's easy to miss things in a campaign like this because the generic you out there who don't know everything there is to know about podcasting, that also means you don't know what you don't know about podcasting. And so it can be very easy to get overwhelmed very quickly and find that ultimately you're not really sure where you're going with this whole thing.
And a question that's coming up for me out of curiosity is the majority of podcasts that I'm a guest on, we're doing it on some platform similar to Zoom, where it's actually video on, and then the podcast itself is primarily audio. Can you give some insights as to why you would want the video part as well?
Well, I am more of an advocate for the audio side because in general, even though our commute patterns have changed a lot in the last 3 years, most people are still doing something else while they're listening to podcasting. It may not be driving in rush hour traffic as much anymore, but it's usually working out or maybe doing housework or something like that. So while I don't think it's bad to have the video side, and in fact, I try to put our podcast that I produce onto YouTube, although I do it in a way that is still audio based. It doesn't have the live video feeds on it, but I certainly don't think there's any reason, if you're so inclined and you want to set up a nice visual space, to do that sort of show and to have the visual aspect. I think that's fine. But I really feel like for the types of podcasts that we tend to do in the professional spaces, where it is something like Zoom and you're not in the same room together, they don't make quite as much sense to prioritize, at least.
I appreciate you expanding onto that. And so with that and all the things that needed to be done to set up, it sounds like there might be some mistakes or pitfalls that beginners have. What are some of the traps that they might fall into or could actually avoid?
Yeah, I would say there's probably 3 big ones. The first one would be, it's just not quite professional, if that makes sense. It would mostly have to do with the sound. It could have to do with the video aspect as well, if that's not done well. It could also have to do with the logo, the promotional materials being put out there, the way that the podcast looks out live, all the sorts of things that, you know, when you work with a producer, they ensure that sort of thing is top notch and it's up to the kind of best practices spec that fits the space. When it's your first time, it's easy to overlook that. Even larger firms that have marketing departments behind them, it's still a lot of new stuff, as we just talked about. So it's easy to fall into that trap. And audio production is hard too. So even with modern tools and computers and even some AI things that are saying they're all in one, they'll take care of the production for you, that's somewhat true, but it's still really easy for things to sound choppy or unnatural. And there will be a lot of content out there that's very interesting, but it never really takes off because the sound and look are amateurish and slapped together.
Okay, I think that that's just important to recognize, is that if you're not using a good microphone and it affects the sound quality, people are just going to bounce off because they won't tolerate that.
That's right. That's exactly right. They might come and check it out, but even if they can't quite put their finger on what they didn't like about it or what was wrong, it will drive them away if the professional sound isn't there. So I would say that's the biggest pitfall. There's also the issue that you often see, it's sometimes referred to as pod fade. It's that it's kind of a combination of two things. It's either not sticking to a consistent production schedule. So, you might have planned, I'm going to do this bi-weekly, but then life gets in the way and you end up spacing your episodes by 3 weeks or a month, or you don't pick even a consistent day of the week, that sort of thing. It's easy to have the momentum at the beginning, but to really push through and drive that momentum into listenership, you have to keep the episodes coming. And
then what I'm hearing about is that people get inconsistent, they're not fully committed, and something else might take priority instead. But if you're looking at it from a marketing point of view and wanting to attract listeners, then the consistency is really important because it builds trust as well as a connection with the audience.
That's it.
The other part that I've seen a lot is that I'll listen to somebody and I'll actually maybe like their content, but they only have like 3 or 4 podcasts and then there's nothing else there. So when that happens, I see 1 or 2 things, and I'm interested in your opinion about it. Either they only started out with like 1 or 2, and instead of getting some momentum and traction in the beginning, or else they just burned out. Any thoughts as to what happens?
More than likely, it's that they've burned out, because I would imagine if you liked their content, you would have subscribed, and then you would have seen some updates that more episodes were coming out. Most podcasts launch with 2 episodes, and that's fairly typical because you do want to be able to build the momentum over time and build the listenership over time. That said, there's nothing wrong with releasing more to really start with a catalog to begin with, but the drawback of that is it's going to take a lot longer before you actually launch. So it can be difficult sometimes to make the call on what you think the best number to start with is, but I tend to gravitate toward about 2.
And then any ideas to what a consistent schedule would be best for someone starting off with something like this?
Sure. The mistake I see sometimes is that people are like 90% of the way there, but they don't quite want to commit. And that can have 2 pitfalls. 1, they'll set their episode frequency too spaced out. And then 2, because they won't then get the feedback they want from high listenership, then they'll think, yeah, okay, so I kind of chose the right amount because I'm not getting a lot out of this. It's really vital that at a minimum, the frequency of episodes be about bi-weekly or semi-monthly, twice a month. And that way your listeners they're waiting, they're excited. They know that another show is coming and it's not going to be too long in the future.
And what I'm hearing is maybe once a week to once every other week, so that there's some type of pattern. One of the other things you were mentioning before, Justin, was that it takes a while to see the results.
Yes.
As far as your listeners go. What would be that timeline? Because marketing, when it's something like this, is a long-term game.
It is. That's not to say that you won't see some relatively immediate results. I have a client who I've just begun to work with who only started his show in January, and he has already received some new clients who said that they came to him because they saw the podcast, and it has not had that much time to get a lot of traction, but it has still had that return for him already, and that will only continue to grow. But it is reasonable to expect that at least for the first year, you're not going to be seeing the kind of listenership where you're ranking in the top 10%, the top 5% of some of these, metrics that are out there that measure podcast listenership. That takes time to build, and almost no show, not even the best known ones, your Brene Browns and those sorts of shows, started out with a huge listenership. They had to build that up as well.
And so it sounds like it's an even playing field where we all have an opportunity to get to that top ranking. But I think that having someone who knows how to guide the way so that you're avoiding some of these pitfalls, you're not stumbling, you're getting the best results out of the commitment. would be actually hiring a producer. So is that going to be, very expensive for someone who's starting to think out about doing this?
Well, with podcasting, like most things, there's definitely a pretty high level of the whole you get what you pay for aspect. I can only, of course, speak for myself. My services are geared towards really preventing that sort of momentum loss and burnout from having so many things going on, that I'm taking as many things off the plate for you as possible. And you're just needing to talk to your guests or record your own episodes. And I'm pretty much handling everything else. Now, I obviously think that's worth it, even though having that much of sort of a white glove approach is going to cost more. But the difference, especially when you factor in opportunity cost, between having that sort of bespoke and personalized approach versus a cookie cutter, one size fits all service that you see out there, some of which I've worked directly with, you're responsible for so much with those sorts of things that if you need to make a change, if you need guidance, if you need coaching, you're either taking care of it yourself, you're looking it up yourself, or you're finding someone else to help you and you're paying them like a voice coach or something. So my goal is to kind of find that sweet spot that to both live up to the idea that you get what you pay for, but also ultimately be a lower cost solution.
And I really agree with what you're talking about, Justin, because what I feel with so many firm owners is that when they're looking at their business and their firms, they can either go with the factory model, where it's a very transactional relationship, or be more client-centered, where they're being seen as a consultant and able to really give more guidance. And it sounds like that's the options out there also, is you can go with some option for production where they don't know you. It's just very transactional. Whereas you're at the other end of the spectrum, you're more boutique, I'm hearing, where you know your clients, you know what's going on with them, and you might be able to give them some guidance to be able to make incremental changes that have a big result over time, because you really know what they need and you're thinking about them probably even when you're not meeting with them.
Yes, and that's the exact idea I had. And the reason I had it is because I've been in the professional space myself. I started my own solo practice law firm after I graduated law school over a decade ago. So I know exactly what it's like to be living that life. And so it's easier for me to anticipate the needs of people who are professionals. And I've just so happened to fall in with the accounting crowd, but many of the same pressures that apply to lawyers apply to accountants too. And so my whole goal with that is to ease that pain and that pressure.
And I'm in full agreement with you. I see it as a wise investment because it lets them have the essence of hosting a podcast and networking, having it attract clients, but they don't have to do all the behind the scenes technical stuff, which is going to take them a lot longer than having someone like you who expertly knows what things are going to work and what things to avoid.
Yeah, that's the idea, as well as help with marketing assets and strategies and campaigning, on the various social media platforms, all those sorts of things. Having someone, search engine optimization, that's another big one. So all of these things that otherwise, yes, you'd have to find either the personal time or the resources within your organization to first learn about in the podcasting context and then execute. A lot of that is just completely taken off your plate, and all you have to worry about is making sure you and your guests sound good.
And if there is a firm owner who's thinking about this, they don't want to know all the back end technical stuff themselves, what are some of the things that they ought to be looking for in a podcasting partner?
Well, it's really because everyone can offer you the technical side. I think it's important to find someone that's willing to roll their sleeves up with you, be creative. At its core, a podcast is a really creative thing. And so it's important that your partner in producing it understands what your goals are, your business's goals, and what you're trying to accomplish personally. And take that idea that I talked about that you have, that you want to turn into this podcast, take that within all that context and create the podcast that's best geared toward making that happen.
I really appreciate everything that you've shared. I continue to learn from our conversations together also, Justin. You're making a difference. And some of the things that I got from our conversation today was the steps for launching a podcast, avoiding some of those pitfalls, and what is required behind the scenes to produce one. So if somebody wanted to reach out, have a further conversation with you, Justin, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
I would just love to receive an email from anyone who would love to talk. So you can email me directly at justin@professionalproductions.net. You can also check out the website, professionalproductions.net. And there is a button right there at the top that says, let's chat. And please feel free to book a time with me to get together and have a little conversation about your ideas. Certainly no obligation. I enjoy learning about people and what their plans are. So I would love to hear about what kind of ideas you have for a podcast.
Justin, thank you so much for the engaging conversation, and to everybody taking time away from working in their business to join us today. This is Loren Fogelman with Business Success Solution, showing accounting professionals how to double their revenues working half the time.